After reviewing the entire autopsy file and all related documents, and the accident reconstruction performed by Don Schmaltzbauer, in this third video, Dr. Amatuzio offers several critical observations and additional evidence supporting her accidental death theory.
That was correct. But as you know, that is just a cause of death and not a manner of death. Manner of death can be suicide, accident, homicide, undetermined, or even natural. We knew this was not natural. So what was the manner of death? These are the autopsy photos. This is a photograph showing the wound cleaned up. Now, first of all, you see the nice imprint pattern. It's very clear. This is a contact type entrance gunshot wound, and it matched perfectly with the weapon. But what I also want to point out to you is where this is actually located. Those of you in the audience want to put your hand up to your right temple. You know where that is. Now, move back to above your ear, and now go up about 1.5 inches. That's where it was located. Okay. That's important, because those of you who have investigated suicidal contact gunshot wounds to the head know that not always, but most commonly, the entrance wound is located more in this thinner area in the right temple. It is less commonly located above the right ear. This is a photograph of the left side. Notice the exit wound. Here's his left ear. You go up about 3 inches and then go back about 2 inches, and that's where that stellate, almost star-shaped, L-shaped exit wound is located. So the path of the bullet was right to left, slightly upward and slightly backwards. As you take a look at this, I want you to think back on the vehicle and think of where that bullet exited and where it was found in the visor. Don, if you were going to shoot yourself in the head, how in the world would you bend your head in order to get that into the visor here?
It has to be down.
You'd have to be down, and you'd be looking down like this.
In this position.
Okay. Toxicology, as you would expect, was negative. Urine drug screen, blood alcohol, and carbon monoxide analysis was negative. So the exhaust system on the squad was working perfectly. The Hennepin County Medical Examiner ruled this, as they should have, a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. They took a look at this scene, and they took a look at the circumstances, and they called this a suicide. This was absolutely against everything that the Hoeft family could possibly figure out, particularly a suicide in the squad, and a suicide, as you're going to see with the other circumstances. The day of the autopsy, which was the day following his death, the 7th of November, Lieutenant Terry Hoeft talked to the resident forensic pathologist that was doing the autopsy, a doctor that I highly respect. And she said to him, "We find it very difficult to imagine that this could have been accidental. We just don't think this could happen." Forensic pathologists are just not taught about accidental discharges. But because Dr. Gary Peterson, then the chief medical examiner, is an excellent forensic pathologist, and he was concerned, he sent it to 2 other chiefs. Dr. Donahue, the Chicago medical examiner, and Dr. Jeff Jensen, who was a friend of mine, and who was the Milwaukee medical examiner. Dr. Peterson also said if there are other concerns, bring them forward. And so a lot of other family members called, wrote letters, sent to them incidents of law enforcement. Now this, of all the things that I'm going to show you that came up in Dr. Donahue's and Jensen's objections, this is the one you're going to want to pay the most attention to. I'd like you to read it, particularly those of you in law enforcement. All right, what it says is, to accomplish this, the body was found in a remote location. The gunshot wound was self-inflicted and intentional. In order to accomplish this, Officer Hoeft had to place a loaded magazine in the weapon, chamber the first round, place the safety in the fire position, press the gun against his temple, and pull the trigger. I am married to a police officer. I brought this home, and I said, "Tom, look at this." And he said, "Janice, That's preposterous. Officers do not carry an unloaded weapon. They carry their weapon armed, hot, ready to go. How could the medical examiner, the chief medical examiner of Chicago, not have known that? So that to me was an important issue. Let's go on. There were some other issues, and I'm going to cover them briefly. He was leaving a 4-year relationship with a woman in Madison with whom he'd had a child. He had trouble when he was put on a night shift. He couldn't get any sleep. And he was upset that he had not been able to get a job as a patrol officer. He saw this doctor 3 times, and the doctor gave him some trazodone and Celexa. He refilled those prescriptions twice. He had not been on any of those medications for over a year at the time of his death. The other things that these physicians said were the stressors, which could have been, was his parents' divorce, his daughter, and alcohol abuse. Now notice Ryan had just gotten on at the St. Paul Police Department, and he had undergone a psychological eval at that point as well. Divorce was 6 years earlier. The DWI was the same year as the divorce when he first went away to college, being a sophomore. And he was living at home with his mom. And he had a very amicable relationship with his daughter's mom. Dr. Freiberg, who did the psych eval, showed that his evaluation said the DWI in 1995 appeared to be an isolated incident. It was not reflective of any ongoing problem, and that Ryan would probably make a solid contribution to the sheriff's office, including in areas of leadership and supervision. He actually said that Ryan was an alpha, and that he gave orders very well. I have a sense that most officers are. I think you have to be. And the last thing that the doc said was unhappiness in his endeavor to find satisfactory employment in the police department. Well, of interest, on the night of his death, Ryan had sent a letter to the sheriff's office, Lieutenant Cooper. Now remember, his new flame, Sarah, was a jail detention deputy. This was a person he was very interested in, and he would see when he was working there. He wanted to go back to the jail. He also gave as a reason for wanting to go back, he just didn't like all the paperwork involved in being a patrol officer. So he said here, Lieutenant Cooper, I just want to send you a quick note, let you know I'm still very much hoping to come back to work at the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office. This is after 4 months on the St. Louis Park PD. I also want to thank you for your help in this matter. If reinstatement is not possible, I would still like to apply for the next license class. Thanks again, Ryan Hoeft. This letter was received after Ryan had died. The other thing one of the doctors had said was the decedent was trained in the safe operation of a weapon. And he should have been trained. He was trained for 1 day. When he had trained in St. Louis Park PD, he had trained for 1 day. When he was in skills, he used a Smith & Wesson. What he was using now was an HK. You're going to become very familiar. Don's going to be showing you and talking to you about this weapon, which is a different weapon, an unusual, more unusual weapon with a decocking lever and safeties. He had only fired this 1 day, and he fired about 500 to 600 rounds. Remember, he died 3 weeks after being taken off of being with an FTO. This is not a seasoned or experienced officer.
Before proceeding to the final video, which exposes the legal battle the Hoeft family endured in an attempt to get the Hennepin County Medical Examiner's Office to reopen their son's case, we would like to take a moment to summarize the evidence brought forth in this reconstruction and following investigations. It is known that at 9:35 p.m. Ryan took a lunch break. Then, from approximately 9:53 to 10:04, he assisted in a prisoner transfer at the St. Louis Park Police Department. Records do not indicate if the officer he assisted was ever questioned with regard to Ryan's weapon status. Was it with him and locked in a box at the department, or was it in the vehicle? Yet there is this photo at the scene of the accident of his wide open duty bag sitting right next to him. Why? At 11:37, transmissions began attempting to contact Ryan. There were no replies. Yet between that time and the time he left the station at 10:04, and then at 11:17, which was his final recorded contact, his contacts with friends and fellow officers made no mention of any injuries that could have caused his bruising. Since their original investigation began on November 6, 2001, the Hennepin County Medical Examiner's Office has adamantly held the following position. As verified in a letter written by Chicago Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Edmund Donahue, that it was a 5-step process Ryan had to perform in order for his weapon to fire. Therefore, it was his intention to commit suicide. Those 5 steps were to place a loaded magazine in his weapon, to chamber the first round, to place the safety in a fire position, to press his gun against his right temple, and then to pull the trigger. At issue are 2 things with this line of reasoning upon which they based their suicide decision. First, the entrance wound was not at the normally expected place, the temple. It was about 1.5 inches over his right ear. And second, it took 10 years and a threat of suit under the Freedom of Information Act for Tom Scott, the St. Louis Park City Attorney, to divulge the truth. At the time of Ryan's death, it was the St. Louis Park Police Department policy to carry their weapons hot, safety off, and ready to fire. The second argument put forth by both the Hennepin County Sheriff's Department and the Hennepin County Medical Examiner's Office is that there is no proof it was Ryan's vehicle that impacted the curb, and with his vehicle prematurely disposed of, there was no way to counter this claim. Yet they had the proof right in front of them, with the autopsy photos of the bruising on Ryan's body, which aligned exactly with the center-mounted equipment in his vehicle. But because this critical information was not considered relevant, it was never included in the coroner's report. While Don Schmaltzbauer's reenactment shows the dynamics of the accident, where did the force come from that created the significant bruising exactly matching the equipment placement? It can be explained by analyzing how the suspension system reacted to the curb impact and subsequent directional change of the vehicle. In the reenactment at 32 miles an hour, after turning slightly to the right and encountering the curb, the accelerometer indicated a 0.82 body G-force towards the door. When the vehicle direction instantly changed to the left, that leftward G-force was measured at 0.56. Given his approximate weight of 200 pounds, that equates to a 360-pound force towards the door, which was immediately countered by a 312-pound force to the right towards the center-mounted equipment. Ryan was not wearing his seatbelt at the time. He had his weapon in one hand and the steering wheel in the other. He had no way to brace himself for these impacts. This photo shows that reaction of the vehicle's suspension to instantly climbing up over the curb and the steering correction of turning left. Note that the right front spring and shock absorber virtually completely compressed, as shown by the difference in bumper height. These heavy-duty police-rated components will instantly release that compressed energy with an upward force of approximately 1,100 pounds, the rated weight capacity of that wheel position, causing an instant increase in height at that right front corner of the vehicle of about 3 to 5 inches. And because of the leverage, a more forceful increase with a slightly lesser height increase will occur at the center point of the vehicle. That center point is where the equipment is mounted directly to the floor. It will instantly increase in height with tremendous force. However, the right side of the seat has foam padding and springs that are collapsing under the shifting weight of Ryan's body. This difference of the increasing height of the equipment and the decreasing height of Ryan's body caused the jamming of the weapon against his head and the impact to his body being held against the equipment by a force of about 312 pounds. This energy release created the bruises observed on Ryan's head and body. This is the only scenario that could have produced those matching bruises and proves well beyond a reasonable doubt that it was Ryan's vehicle that made the curb impact marks. This concludes the third video in this series.